Marcus was just another faceless worker in the corporate machine, living day by day, trying to avoid trouble. On this planet, the line between humans and aliens was thin but rigid, with an underlying tension always simmering beneath the surface. In the grand, steel-hulled industrial complex where he worked, that tension often spilled over into open hostility. The higher-ups didn't care. To them, it was just another day of production, another number in their ledger. It was during one of those long, soul-crushing shifts that Marcus saw it, the incident that would change everything. An alien coworker, one of the more peaceful, quiet types, was being harassed by a corporate overseer. The alien hadn't done anything wrong, but the overseer, known for his cruelty, had singled him out. It started with mocking words, petty insults that escalated as the alien tried to ignore them. Then the overseer shoved him, hard, knocking the alien to the ground. Marcus felt a spark ignite in him. He didn't know why he cared so much, why this time was different. But watching the overseer tower over the fallen alien, spewing more hateful words, something in Marcus snapped. He stepped forward before he could stop himself, his voice rising to cut through the noise. "That's enough!" Marcus's voice echoed across the loading bay, surprising even himself. The overseer stopped, his eyes narrowing as they turned toward Marcus. Everyone else froze. The other workers kept their heads down, as they always did, pretending not to see what was happening. The alien, still on the ground, looked up in shock. No one ever stood up against the overseers. "And who do you think you are?" The overseer sneered, taking a few steps toward Marcus. His tone was thick with contempt, the kind that came with unchecked power. "I'm just saying, you've made your point. Let him be," Marcus said, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the entire floor on him now. He wasn't the kind of guy to pick fights, especially not with someone as dangerous as this overseer. But he couldn't back down now. He wouldn't. The overseer's smirk twisted into something darker. "You think you're a hero? You think you can tell me how to do my job?" Marcus clenched his fists but didn't say anything. The overseer didn't wait for a response. He stepped closer until he was right in Marcus's face. "You've got a lot of nerve, boy. Let's see how much you've got when you're on the other side of those bars." Before Marcus could react, the overseer made a swift gesture. 2 security drones, hovering nearby, buzzed to life and moved in. The mechanical clamps latched onto Marcus's arms, and before he knew it, he was being dragged toward the exit. "You're finished here," the overseer spat, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You want to play the hero? Let's see how long you last in a cell." The entire scene took less than a minute, but in that time, Marcus's life had been torn apart. The alien he had defended was still frozen in place, too shocked to say anything. As Marcus was pulled away, he managed one last look at the alien, their eyes meeting for a brief second. Then the doors closed behind him, and Marcus was thrown into the cold, indifferent hands of the corporate justice system. His punishment was swift and severe. The overseer had made sure of that. Within hours, Marcus was processed and dumped into a corporate prison, a place where those who defied authority were sent to rot. There were no trials, no appeals, just a dark cell and endless time to think about your mistakes. Sitting alone in his cell, Marcus tried to make sense of what had just happened. Why had he intervened? He wasn't the kind of guy who got involved in other people's problems. He wasn't a fighter or a leader. He was just a worker, like everyone else. But now, his life was ruined because he couldn't stand to watch that alien get beaten down. As the hours passed, the weight of what he had done settled in. The overseer had humiliated him in front of everyone. His job, his reputation, it was all gone. There was no way back. Marcus leaned his head against the cold steel wall of his cell, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But deep down, something told him he hadn't. There was a reason he couldn't just stand by. Maybe it wasn't as simple as right or wrong. Maybe, for once in his life, he had followed an instinct that had been buried for too long. The night in the cell was long, filled with an eerie silence that gnawed at his thoughts. His mind drifted to the alien, wondering what would happen to him. Had his defense even made a difference? Or had it only made things worse? Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was anything but restful. Marcus's dreams were strange, vivid, unlike anything he had ever experienced. He found himself in a place that wasn't his world, surrounded by strange landscapes and alien skies. In his dream, he saw flashes of faces, both human and alien, locked in battle. There was fire, destruction, and amidst it all, a feeling of overwhelming oppression. Then came the voices, alien voices, calling out to him, not in words he understood but in emotions, in sensations. They were desperate, pleading for help, for someone to rise and lead them out of the darkness. And they were looking at him. Marcus tried to understand, but the dream was too fragmented, too chaotic. The images shifted too quickly for him to grasp fully. But one thing was clear: the alien he had defended was part of something bigger, something far more important than just a workplace dispute. The dream faded, leaving Marcus with an uneasy feeling, as though he had glimpsed something profound but was still too far from understanding it. When he woke, the images lingered in his mind, refusing to let go. He sat up in his cold cell, rubbing his temples. It was just a dream, wasn't it? But somehow, it felt like more than that. Something had shifted. The feeling of isolation and defeat that had gripped him the night before had lessened, replaced by a faint but growing sense of purpose. What that purpose was, though, Marcus still had no idea. Marcus awoke in the cold, dark cell, his head swimming with fragments of the dream. It felt as if he had just witnessed something monumental, yet none of it made sense. The alien world, the rebellion, the call for help, it clung to his thoughts like a distant memory just out of reach. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just the result of stress, but the intensity of the dream left him unsettled. As he sat there, the silence in the cell seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain. It was like the air had changed around him, heavier somehow, more significant. The prison, which had felt so empty the night before, now felt different. Marcus couldn't pinpoint what had shifted, but something had. His thoughts kept circling back to the alien he had defended. Why had the overseer targeted him? There had been no reason for the cruelty, no logic behind it. But maybe that was the point: there was no logic to the system they lived under. It was all about control, about keeping both humans and aliens subjugated. That dream, those visions of rebellion, started to make more sense now. The overseers didn't just want obedience. They wanted fear, silence, compliance at any cost. Marcus had disrupted that silence, however briefly. And now he was paying the price. The dream had been too vivid to ignore, though. He had seen faces, human and alien, rising up together, fighting against the overseers. The scenes of battle had been chaotic, but there had been unity in the struggle. And the voices, those alien voices calling out to him, it was as if they were waiting for something, or someone. What disturbed Marcus most wasn't just the vividness of the dream. It was the feeling that it was more than a dream. It felt like a glimpse into something real, something unfolding beyond the walls of his cell. But why him? Why would he, a low-level worker, be at the center of anything that important? He wasn't a hero or a leader. He was just someone who had made a rash decision to defend someone weaker than himself. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. The alien he had defended wasn't just a random co-worker. There was something else going on. The dream had shown him that much. But what was his role in all of it? Was he just a pawn in a larger game? Or did he have a choice in how things played out? The night dragged on, with the dream still vivid in his mind. Sleep eluded him, and instead, he spent hours replaying the scenes over and over. The rebellion, the faces, the feeling of being part of something bigger, it gnawed at him. He tried to make sense of it, but every time he thought he was close, the meaning slipped away, leaving him with only fragments of a much larger puzzle. By the time dawn approached, Marcus felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. The feeling that something was about to happen was impossible to shake. He had spent his life trying to avoid attention, trying to stay under the radar, but now it felt like he was being pulled into something far bigger than himself. He didn't know how long he had been lost in thought when he heard it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. His body tensed. No one visited the prison cells this early. The guards barely paid attention to the prisoners, and most of the time, the place was a forgotten corner of the complex. The sound grew closer, more deliberate. Marcus's pulse quickened. He didn't know what to expect, but he had a feeling that whatever was about to happen was tied to the dream. The door to his cell slid open without warning, and before Marcus could react, 3 figures stepped inside. They weren't guards. They moved too quickly, too efficiently. And then, to his shock, he saw a familiar face among them, the alien he had defended. The same one who had been the target of the overseer's cruelty just the day before. But there was something different about him now. He wasn't the scared, cowering figure Marcus had stood up for. He was calm, focused, and his eyes met Marcus's with a kind of understanding that sent a shiver down his spine. "Get up," the alien said, his voice steady but urgent. Marcus hesitated, still trying to process what was happening. "What? We don't have time to explain everything now," the alien interrupted. "But you need to trust us. We're here to get you out." Marcus stared at him, confusion swirling in his mind. "Why? Why are you doing this?" The alien exchanged a glance with the other 2 figures, both human, both moving with a purpose that suggested they knew exactly what they were doing. "Because you stood up for me," the alien said. "That wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was a test." "A test?" Marcus repeated, disbelief creeping into his voice. "What are you talking about?" The alien stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's more at stake here than you realize. The overseers have been keeping us all under their control for too long. But there's a rebellion growing, quietly in the shadows. We've been watching, waiting for the right people to step up. When you defended me, it wasn't just an act of defiance. It was the signal we've been waiting for." Marcus's mind reeled. This was too much to take in. "A rebellion? A test? I don't understand," he muttered. "I'm not part of any rebellion. I just couldn't stand by and watch. And that's exactly why we need you," the alien said, his voice firm. "You didn't stand by. You acted. That's more than most people are willing to do." One of the human figures stepped forward, a woman with sharp eyes and a confident stance. "We don't have time to explain everything now," she said, her tone all business. "But the rebellion needs people like you, people who won't just follow orders, who are willing to take a stand when it matters." Marcus felt his head spinning. This couldn't be real. He was just a worker, someone who had never been involved in anything like this. And yet the dream from the night before came rushing back to him, the faces, the battles, the voices calling out to him. "Come with us," the woman said, her gaze intense. "We can explain more once we're safe, but right now, we need to move." Marcus hesitated, glancing at the alien he had defended. There was a connection between them now, something deeper than he could explain. He could feel it in the way the alien looked at him, in the quiet understanding between them. Taking a deep breath, Marcus nodded. He didn't know what he was getting into, but something told him this was where he was meant to be. Marcus followed them without hesitation, his mind still trying to catch up with what was happening. The corridors of the prison felt different now, no longer a place of confinement, but a pathway to something far bigger. The alien he had defended led the way, moving with a sense of purpose, as if he had done this before. The other 2, both human, moved in sync, clearly experienced in breaking people out of places like this. It was all happening so fast, but Marcus didn't have time to question it. As they moved through the dimly lit halls, Marcus couldn't help but think back to the dream. It had felt so vivid, so real, and now here he was, being pulled into the very thing he had seen, a rebellion. It didn't seem possible, but there was no denying the weight of the moment. He had always been someone who tried to avoid attention, to keep his head down and survive. Now, he was being told that he was part of something much larger, something that could change everything. They moved quickly, avoiding detection from the few guards that patrolled the area. The alien, who still hadn't introduced himself, stopped suddenly and motioned for them to be silent. Marcus held his breath as the sound of a guard's footsteps echoed through the corridor ahead. The tension was palpable, but the group remained calm, waiting for the moment to pass. When it did, they moved again, slipping through the shadows like ghosts. Finally, they reached a hidden passage, a maintenance tunnel that led away from the prison and into the deeper parts of the industrial complex. The woman who had spoken earlier, clearly one of the leaders, gestured for them to enter. Marcus didn't ask any questions. He simply followed, his mind racing with a mix of fear and excitement. As they walked deeper into the tunnel, the woman glanced at Marcus. "You're probably wondering why we're doing this," she said, her voice steady but urgent. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out." The alien, who had been silent since the escape began, spoke up. "You were chosen, Marcus. Not just because you defended me, but because you represent something we've been looking for." Marcus frowned. "Chosen for what?" The alien's eyes met his. "To be part of the rebellion. To help us overthrow the overseers and bring freedom to both humans and aliens. We've been watching, waiting for the right moment, and when you stood up for me, it showed us that you're ready." "Ready for what?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I'm just a worker. I'm not a leader, I'm not a fighter." The woman interrupted. "That's exactly why you're the right person. You didn't stand up because you wanted power or recognition. You stood up because it was the right thing to do. That's what we need, people who act on principle, not ambition." Marcus shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. "But why me? There must be others who—" "There are," the alien said, cutting him off. "But you're different. You have something inside you, something that connects you to both humans and aliens in a way most people don't understand yet. That's why the overseers targeted you. They see you as a threat, even if you don't see it in yourself." Marcus fell silent, unsure of what to say. It all sounded too surreal, too far removed from the life he had known. But as they continued deeper into the tunnels, something began to stir within him, a sense of purpose that had been absent for so long. He had spent years simply trying to survive, to get by in a system that didn't care about people like him. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was part of something meaningful. The tunnel eventually led them to an underground hideout, a makeshift base hidden beneath the industrial complex. As they entered, Marcus saw a mix of humans and aliens working together, preparing for something bigger than he had ever imagined. There was a quiet determination in the air, a sense that they were on the brink of something important. The woman turned to him. "This is just the beginning. We've been planning this for a long time, but we need people like you to make it happen. The overseers are strong, but they're not invincible. If we work together, humans and aliens, we can bring them down." Marcus took in the sight of the rebellion's base, the faces of those who had already dedicated themselves to the cause. It was clear that this wasn't just a small group of dissenters. It was a growing movement, one that had been quietly gathering strength in the shadows. "You'll be trained," the alien said, stepping closer to Marcus. "You'll learn how to fight, how to lead. But more than that, you'll learn what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself." Marcus felt a surge of doubt. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I've never been in a fight like this before." The woman placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression firm but kind. "None of us were, in the beginning. But you have the heart for it, and that's what matters most. The rest we can teach you." For a moment, Marcus didn't know what to say. He had always seen himself as someone who kept his head down, who did what needed to be done to survive. But now, he was being told that he was more than that he had the potential to make a real difference. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it felt like something he couldn't turn away from. The alien smiled, a small but genuine gesture. "You're one of us now, Marcus. We'll show you the way." Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of the moment settling over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: there was no going back. He had crossed a line, and now he was part of something far bigger than himself. As they began discussing their next move, Marcus listened carefully, absorbing everything he could. The rebellion had been quietly growing for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had agents embedded within the corporate structure, gathering information and sabotaging the overseer's operations from the inside. But they needed more people like Marcus, people who weren't afraid to stand up and fight for what was right. It wasn't long before Marcus began to see the bigger picture. The overseers weren't just oppressing workers, they were maintaining control over entire planets, keeping both humans and aliens in line through fear and manipulation. The rebellion wasn't just about freedom for one group, it was about breaking the chains for everyone. And now, Marcus had a role to play in that fight. The conversation shifted to strategy, and Marcus found himself drawn in. He listened as the leaders laid out their plans, discussing potential targets and upcoming missions. It was clear that they were preparing for something big, and Marcus knew that he would be part of it. He had never imagined himself in a position like this, standing on the brink of rebellion, preparing to fight against the system that had controlled his life for so long. But as the hours passed, he felt something shift inside him. The doubts that had weighed him down began to fade, replaced by a sense of determination he hadn't known he was capable of. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Marcus had never imagined his life would take such a turn, but there was no denying that everything had changed. The rebellion was no longer some distant, abstract idea. It was real, and he was a part of it now. The base buzzed with quiet activity, everyone focused on their tasks, preparing for the next phase. He could feel the urgency in the air, but more than that, there was a sense of hope. For the first time, it felt like they had a chance. His first mission came quickly. It wasn't some grand assault or daring infiltration, but something vital nonetheless. The rebellion had identified a group of workers who had been imprisoned for minor infractions, just like Marcus had been. These people, humans and aliens alike, were potential recruits for the rebellion, but first, they needed to be freed. It was Marcus's task to help make that happen. The mission was straightforward: get in, free the prisoners, and get out without drawing too much attention. But Marcus knew even the simplest plans could go wrong. His heart raced as they prepared to move out, the reality of what he was about to do settling in. This wasn't just about standing up for someone in a heated moment anymore. This was organized resistance, calculated defiance. As they moved through the outskirts of the industrial complex, Marcus found himself working alongside the very alien he had defended, now a key ally in the rebellion. The trust between them had grown quickly, forged in the fire of shared purpose. They didn't need to speak much, the connection was there, unspoken but undeniable. It was a bond that transcended species, something Marcus had never thought he would experience. And it was that unity, that understanding, that fueled his determination. When they reached the detention facility, things moved fast. The rebellion had its methods, its tricks, and before long, they were inside, moving through the dark corridors. Marcus's pulse quickened as they approached the cells. His mind flashed back to his own time in that cold, lonely prison. He knew what it felt like to think all hope was lost, and now he was about to bring hope back to these people. They opened the first cell, and the look on the prisoners' faces, first disbelief, then relief, was all the confirmation Marcus needed. This was the right thing to do. One by one, they freed the workers, quickly explaining that they were being offered a chance to join something bigger, something that could change everything. Some were hesitant, others ready to fight immediately, but Marcus could see the spark in each of their eyes. The overseers had tried to crush them, but that spark still remained, waiting to be reignited. The escape went smoother than Marcus had expected. By the time they made it back to the hideout, his adrenaline had started to fade, replaced by the realization of what they had accomplished. They had brought back not just bodies, but hope. Every person they freed was another step toward building something stronger, something capable of challenging the overseers. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself more deeply involved in the rebellion than he had ever anticipated. The freed prisoners were integrated into the group, trained, and prepared for the fights to come. Marcus watched as the movement grew, not just in numbers but in strength and resolve. The people he had helped free weren't just passive victims anymore. They were ready to fight for their freedom. And in them, Marcus saw his own journey reflected back at him. He wasn't just a worker anymore, caught up in the grind of a corrupt system. He was part of something much larger, something that mattered. His role in the rebellion expanded quickly. The leaders, recognizing his growing confidence and natural instincts, began involving him in more strategic discussions. He had never thought of himself as a leader, but now, as he sat with the others, discussing potential targets and ways to undermine the overseer's control, it felt right. His experience working under the overseers gave him a unique perspective, and he found himself offering insights that others hadn't considered. And it wasn't just his tactical input that mattered. People were looking to him, seeing him as a symbol of something more. His defense of the alien worker had become a story that spread through the rebellion like wildfire, a moment of defiance that had sparked hope in others. It was strange for Marcus, being seen in this way. He hadn't set out to be anyone's hero, but now, it seemed, that's exactly what he had become. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus continued to grow into his role. He trained alongside the others, learning how to fight, how to move in the shadows, how to be part of a coordinated effort. The alien who had once been a stranger became his closest ally, and together, they worked on missions that chipped away at the overseer's power. They sabotaged supply lines, freed more workers, and slowly but surely, the rebellion's influence began to spread. Through it all, Marcus never lost sight of why he was doing this. Every time they freed another group of workers, every time they struck a blow against the overseers, it reinforced the simple truth that had driven him from the start: no one should have to live in fear, human or alien. The rebellion wasn't just about revenge or toppling the overseers. It was about building a future where people were free to live their lives without being crushed under the weight of oppression. As word of the rebellion spread, more people began to join. Some were workers who had suffered under the overseers, others were outsiders who had heard whispers of the movement and wanted to be part of it. The ranks of the rebellion swelled, and with each new recruit, their chances of success grew stronger. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments when things went wrong, when people were captured or plans fell apart. But through it all, the rebellion endured. And Marcus endured with it. He had become a leader, not because he had sought out the role, but because the circumstances had called for it. His strength wasn't in commanding others or giving orders. It was in the quiet determination that had brought him to this point. He was fighting for something he believed in, something that mattered, and others followed him because they saw that same belief in themselves. The day finally came when the rebellion launched its largest mission yet, an all-out assault on one of the overseers' key strongholds. It was a risk, but it was also their best chance to strike a blow that would cripple the overseer's control. Marcus was at the heart of the operation, leading a team of both humans and aliens into battle. The fighting was intense, brutal, but there was no turning back now. The rebellion had come too far to stop. As the battle raged on, Marcus fought with everything he had, knowing that the outcome of this fight could change everything. And when the dust finally settled, when the overseer's stronghold lay in ruins and the rebellion stood victorious, Marcus knew that they had done more than just win a battle. They had sparked a revolution. The rebellion wasn't over, it was just beginning. But for the first time, Marcus felt a sense of hope that wasn't fleeting. It was real, tangible, something he could hold on to. The overseers had tried to crush him, but instead, they had created a leader. And now, alongside his allies, both human and alien, Marcus was ready to lead the charge toward a new future, one where freedom wasn't just a dream but a reality waiting to be claimed.